and you're very welcome to our episode of the Grow Remote Show. My name is Joanne Mangan, and I'm the Employers Lead with Grow Remote. Anyone who isn't familiar with Grow Remote, you can find out more about us on our website at growremote.ie. You can also listen back to some of our other sessions on our YouTube channel. Just search for Grow Remote. So I'm really happy and excited to introduce you to our panel today. We're going to be talking all about communication and collaboration in remote teams. This is something that comes up a lot, either within our own community, employers that we talk to every day, and also in the media. There's always articles about you can't communicate remotely, or what about the whiteboard, and what about in person, and all of these questions about can you do effective communication and collaboration remotely. We always say at Grow Remote, we should go to the people who are actually doing it. And we have three representatives from those companies here today. So we have Otonomee, we have Automattic, and we have Glofox. So I'd like to welcome Rebecca from Automattic, and Finn from Glofox, and Brendan from Otonomee. Guys, we're really happy to have you here, and thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to kick off just by asking maybe if everyone could just introduce themselves very briefly, let the group know who you are, a little bit about your company, and about your journey to remote work. And we might start with you, Rebecca, seeing as you're the first to speak. So give us a quick overview of Automattic and how you do remote work.
No problem at all. Great to meet everyone. Thanks everyone for being here. I'm Rebecca Williams. I work in Automattic. Automattic is the people behind WordPress.com, WooCommerce, Tumblr, and many other things that make the internet a wonderful place. I've worked at Automattic now for almost 3.5 years, and I work within the developer experience subdivision of talent. And my role is primarily onboarding our awesome engineers who join us. So we are a 100% distributed company. We don't have a headquarters at all. So everything we do is distributed with a remote mindset as well. So that's me. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks a million. And I think there's a lot we can learn from you, particularly around asynchronous communication, which is something we'll talk about later, because I know Automattic really are pioneers in that way of working. So thanks a lot. Great to have you here, Rebecca. Finn, I'm going to jump to you next. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about Glofox, please.
Yeah, sure. Great to meet everyone. My name is Finn Hegarty. I'm one of the co-founders and Chief Product Officer here at Glofox. So Glofox, we're a B2B SaaS business, software business for the fitness industry. We've been around for about 6 or 7 years. So we started off as a co-located office, then we went to a hybrid, and then now we're fully remote. So and we've done that, pre the pandemic as well. So we've seen what works well, what doesn't work so well as well. So I'm certainly happy to share some of the insights on our journey to fully distributed and remote.
That's great, thanks. And it's really interesting, you'll have a different perspective, say, to Rebecca at Automattic, having gone through the journey of being co-located, then hybrid, then remote. So it'll be interesting to hear how you can compare those three ways of working in terms of communication and collaboration. So thanks, Finn. Great to have you here. And last but not least, we have brendan.ring, who is the Chief People Officer at Otonomee. Hey, Brendan, give us a quick introduction.
Hey, Joanne, thanks very much. As you said, so I'm the Chief People Officer for Otonomee. So we're fully remote as well. We're a purpose-built, what we call purpose-built BPO. So anyone's not familiar with the BPO world, it's the outsourcing world. So a lot of our partners outsource, customer support, technical support, sales to us. I suppose what's interesting about Otonomee is we're only less than 2 years in existence, and I said we're fully remote. It wouldn't be typical for a BPO to be remote, okay, which kind of puts us in an interesting space. A lot of us would have come from an Irish BPO called Voxpro, and we would have scaled, and we would have offices in different cities in the world. And so we decided to do something very different. We saw a lot of the challenges that there was obviously a lot of great things that happened, but there was a lot of challenges around talent and communication and getting people and keeping people and engaging people. So Otonomee have, I suppose, gone away from the traditional BPO and into the more modern, flexible model of remote work.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Brendan. That's great. So one thing I will mention, I'm going to give a little pitch here for our employer partnership program. All of the three companies on here are members of our partnership program. And that's one of the things they do to support us, is come and join us on these kind of events. So if anyone's interested on the call and learning a bit more or giving us a hand with some of these events going forward, you can drop me an email at joanne@growremote.ie. Okay, great. So let's start talking about, I think we'll start with collaboration, right? So collaboration, I hear this a lot from companies, particularly companies who are sticking to a hybrid model. One of the reasons they cite for that is collaboration, that they feel like in person is the best way to do brainstorming and collaborating, maybe kicking off a new project. So I'm going to go to you, Rebecca, first. Has that been your experience? Do you think that collaboration is an issue in a remote team? I'm thinking I know the answer, but tell me a little bit about your experience and what it's like for you in your company in Automattic.
Yeah, sure. So we are 100% distributed and always have been. So one of the first things that struck me when I joined Automattic was how well everyone else modelled how to collaborate asynchronously and also in a remote environment as well. So it became really easy to just kind of watch what other people were doing, see them do it really well, see it work beautifully, and just kind of fall in with that. And also be able to see the outcome as well. I mean, having the opportunity to collaborate whenever it was most convenient to you, rather than in this particular room at this particular time, whether that was convenient for people or not. It was quite powerful to see, and to see the results of the collaborations come to light as well. That was something that made a huge mark on me, really, and it made me want to understand how people do it and how well they do it, and be able to show other people how to do it well as well.
And when you came into Automattic, before that, were you with an in-office organization, and did
Yes.
you feel any difference in terms of how effective the collaboration was? Was it hard for you to adjust to that way of collaborating?
Yeah, it took a while, because I mean the most traditional model is, you have a project, you work on it, you keep your head down, and you show it in when it's ready to, at the point of completion. And the way we do it in Automattic is everything is very iterative, everything is very transparent. So, you can see any project from the moment it's kind of dreamt up to the point where it's completed, and you can collaborate at any point within that time frame as well. So it took quite a lot of getting used to, not in a bad way, just it was quite an unusual way of working. But it's something that I think if you're intentional about it, it can pay dividends. I think if you're trying to replicate what is done in the office to what you can do remotely, you might start running into some problems, because there's so many restrictions with that. But if you're willing to be flexible and to experiment and see what works for the team and the company, I think it really is worth the time.
So maybe a practical example would be good. If let's say it's a project kickoff, right? And it's something new. So you're kind of in that brainstorming ideation phase. So how do you do that? Do you all get on a Zoom call, or do you all work off a document, or or does it vary depending on the project?
It can totally vary. I mean, if the people who are kind of primarily interested in working on it are all within the same, within a reasonable time zone, and it's convenient for everyone to jump on a kickoff call, we can absolutely do that. But we have to be mindful of the fact that other people might want to contribute, who might be either in a different working pattern or in a different time zone. So, making sure that everyone is able to contribute who wants to contribute or who has to contribute is really, really important. And the way we might do that is by using, we have an internal blog system, for want of a better description. It's something we built within Automattic. It's called P2, and absolutely everything we do within Automattic lives in these P2s. They're completely searchable by anyone in the company, and we also use them as project threads. So you can go onto any team's project thread any team's P2 and see what project threads they've got going on. So that is probably a really good example to see the projects kind of start from, I've got this idea, who wants to get involved, right through to, right, okay, we're rolling this out and moving on to the next project.
That's great. That sounds like an adjustment, I think, for some people in terms of learning how to do that. But I imagine once it's up and running and working well, it's probably a bit more efficient. Yeah, absolutely. Great. Thanks. So, Brendan, I might move on to you and talk a little bit about your thoughts on this idea that collaboration is best done in person. Is that something that you disagree with or agree with? What's your thoughts on that?
It depends. The collaboration wasn't done very well in offices when I was there from time to time either, so some of it depends on the company. I suppose there's three things I think of, and following on from what Rebecca said there's definitely a change management piece, right? If you try and do the exact same things that you did in an office what we found is you're going to struggle, right? If that's, really simple example, if you have a management meeting that used to take 4 hours in the office and everyone used to come in and get their teas and coffees, and you're going to try and replicate that 4-hour meeting, I can tell you it's not going to be very successful after a few weeks. What I found, right? You'll see people after 20 minutes maybe turning off their camera, going on mute, because what we found is it's very different, right? Keeping people's attention. So, you hear a lot about outcomes, right? So, like, I suppose from our examples is that you look at what the outcome of that meeting is, right? And then there's ways to dice it. How do you have an hour meeting but still come out with the same outcomes that you would have in a 4-hour meeting, right? Because anyone who took part in a 4-hour meeting in person, didn't listen for the whole meetings, but you can still come out with the same outcome. So definitely for us, there's a change management of how you do things, right? And that's, simple things is, an agreed agenda before, sharing content before so people can read it. So you're not going through all of those things in meetings, because I don't think they work online as well as they would have. I question whether they ever worked even in an office, because I worked in an office for 10 years. I think the other thing is technology, and we'll probably get into technology in a while, is I don't think you can collaborate well from a work from home perspective if your technology isn't there to support you. And we wouldn't be as advanced, I would imagine, as Rebecca and Finn, because we're only 2 years into it, less than 2 years. But if you don't invest in your technology, I can't see you having a really good work from home experience / strategy for your employees. So I believe you can do it, but you absolutely need to change your mindset as to how it works, will be my take. Joanne.
Thanks. And I think that's really important. Even what you said there about the 4-hour management meeting, we all remember those days in the office where someone would stick in a 4-hour management meeting, and I don't even think they'd even give much thought into why it needed to be 4 hours. It was just, you'd block off a half a day and never thought about, do we need this time or not? And you would end up filling the time, but not really that effectively.
It's really important, Joanne, if it's 4 hours. That was the answer, I think. It had to be a 4-hour meeting.
Absolutely. So Finn, it might move over to you, and I think your experience of having gone from office to hybrid to fully remote will be really interesting here. Like, what do you think about collaborating in those different models? Which have you found most effective?
I think it's different, right? It definitely evolves over time, and it has done, right? So from, we started a business where a startup in a room with a pizza box and a whiteboard, right? And it's, you've got those in-person relationships with those folks as well. When we moved to hybrid, that was definitely harder, because then I would say it is a little bit harder to replicate that kind of collaboration when half the room are doing on a whiteboard and the other half are on a Zoom or something. That definitely is something we had to kind of evolve our culture to be this remote first culture, and then put everyone on, that remote first Zoom at the same time when collaborating. So I would say the hybrid was the biggest challenge when people were in a room versus everyone outside. But definitely the way now that we're fully remote, it's like any collaboration, you need to, what are we trying to achieve here, right? So that it's setting that regardless you're in person or remote anyway. So as long as you have those clear objectives and what you're trying to achieve, what the output is, the when and the what and the rest. I think that, we have to, I think you mentioned, Rebecca, about being more intentional. We have to be a lot more deliberate about, okay, we need to do the preparation into any collaboration session. There's a lot more documentation. The prep is done in advance. And to your point, Brendan, then I think it's then about harnessing the technology and the tools then. So we have those tools to be able to facilitate even those whiteboard sessions with the tools today that we can do. So I would say overall, it has taken time to get, the ways of working and to be able to collaborate in remote, but can be just effective. Just took us a while to get there.
Great. And I know, because you mentioned it to me before we started this call, so I know you have just had your offsite where you all met face to face on the Glofox team. So do you facilitate that kind of in-person time? Is that part of your overall kind of strategy around collaborating and team building? Tell me a bit about that.
So we just had a 2-day offsite for the leadership team. We're actually bringing the whole team together. I think it's the week after next to Lisbon. So there'll be 220 people come together then as well. But in the last few days, I think that, I guess it's the same for any high performing team. You need that foundational trust, right? Without that level of trust within the team, you're not going to be getting into this constructive conflict. You're not going to be challenging each other as well. So I think that is very hard to replicate in a remote environment, to build that trust without the personal relationships. So for me, the benefit of bringing people together, for me, and it's really, really refreshing after coming, meeting people, you know, face to face again in a room for 2 days, is it's more about establishing the relationships in that and building that trust and that rapport with the rest of the team. You know, you better understand, you know, their personalities, you know, their strengths and their weaknesses as well. So I think those kind of offsites and in-person things help build the trust within a team. And as a result, then when we're collaborating or working together after that, we're a lot more effective. We're a high performing team because we've got that foundational level of trust. And that is very hard. It just takes longer. Like if I was to spin up a team tomorrow, 10 people, fully remote, they could be as effective, but it's going to take them a lot longer because they wouldn't have that, you know, trust amongst the team, and it's hard to build those personal relationships. So whereas if I spin up the team tomorrow, you know, bring them together for 2 days and then work remotely, I think then they would be more effective. It's just take longer to do it in a fully remote environment.
Yeah, and I know from my own experience at Grow Remote, a few months before I met people face to face, and we were getting on great, and you know, we're building connections, but there was something about that face to face meeting. When we got back online the next day, something felt different. I think it's just that social aspect that people like to connect face to face.
Yeah, big
so
time.
Rebecca, do you guys meet in person at Automattic, or are you fully async all the time?
We do have, now we're kind of moving into less of a restricted global situation. We are moving back towards having team meetups, but you know, during COVID, we didn't. And we did notice that engineers, as they were joining the organization, were saying, you know, I love my team, they're brilliant. And, you know, repeating what Finn said, they were just missing that extra piece of bonding, I guess, with the team. So now we are seeing that, you know, as people are joining, they're being able to partake in a meetup almost immediately, depending on when their team is actually having a meetup. And the responses that we get back are absolutely phenomenal. You know, they do really, really value that short time with the team in a room, being able to forge those bonds straight away. We're looking forward to our first in-person meetup in October. So we're in a fairly new team. I think it was only established sort of just before COVID as well. So this will be the first time that we'll have all been in a room together. During COVID, we actually made use of the time. We had not in real life meetups, which was a bit of a strange concept, but it really worked for us. We basically selected several hours of the day where we were all on time, all on the same time zone, basically. And we set up some time for project work. We set up some time for social events, and we tried to replicate as much of that in-person experience as we possibly could in a time where we just couldn't get together. And it was a lot of fun. I think with a bit of creativity, you can get around it a little bit, but I do agree. I think there is no substitute for just getting people in a room and having that experience.
Great. And I actually see Oliver has a comment, which is really interesting. He's saying young people today, I sound like an old person saying this now, but the youth of today have no issue developing strong relationships. And it's true online. I see this with my daughter. She's very comfortable meeting people online. So it'll be interesting, generationally speaking, how that evolves over time, whether as much value will be placed in that in-person face-to-face time. I think that's a really good point. It'd be great to hear other people's opinions on collaborating in person versus collaborating virtually, what their experiences have been. So please feel free to drop it in the chat or ask any questions that you like. Going to go to you, Brendan, and talk a little bit about the challenges. So particularly, as you mentioned, you know, you came from Vox Pro, which was in office model, and then you've set up Otonomee, and in your space, you're quite an outlier or a pioneer, we'll say, in bringing remote work to the BPO sector. What kind of challenges have you come across when it comes to collaborating and brainstorming and you know, kicking off new things and being innovative? Have you come across any challenges?
Yeah, for sure. I think one, strangely enough, is patience, right? Because I think people believe that, you know, like people were working in an office for I don't know how many years, right? And they expect it to be the exact same, and they expected, like, well, we did this in the office, and now, you know, it's not the same, and we're not as productive, right, in inverted commas. So there's a challenge there of patience for people, right? As in, like, there are huge benefits to come from working from home, right? But what Finn said is it takes time. It's a journey. We're less than 2 years in. We've made massive strides in massive areas, but there's still areas that we're not happy with. We're still challenged by them. One is, which we'll talk about later, is async communication. We are a lot better at it now. If you, I say, compared us to Rebecca, we would be very poor at it, right? And I'm talking about internally. So one is definitely patience. It's like, don't compare where we were and forget about all the other advantages, right? And say, well, actually, this doesn't work. So actually, working from home doesn't suit us. Okay, so one is that. Tech is another one, right? So we've advanced, as a society from a tech perspective, but we're nowhere near it. Like, imagine where it will be in 10 years' time now that there's a lot of remote companies. So we, from a communication and a collaboration perspective, we use WorkVivo. So people is an Irish company. We use it a lot for communication, obviously, but there's more and more of the WorkVivos and the collaboration tools that are kicking in every day. So there's a challenge around tech. There's no doubt about it. They're not as good as you would want right now, but it's normal. People only started, obviously there was remote companies and distributed companies prior to COVID, but really that has shone the light on it, right? And now there's, it's multiplying every day, like Otonomee. So I think there's definitely a challenge when it comes to tech. I think there's a challenge when people are trying to compare and they're not patient. They're saying, oh, well, it's not working exactly the way I want it. It's like, yeah, but don't forget about all of the good things, okay? And I think, I suppose another challenge is remote working is not for everybody. It's probably not for every organization, and it's not for every person. Okay, and sometimes you can hire people who want remote to be for them because maybe it suits their lifestyle, but it doesn't actually when they get into it. And I suppose the good thing is a lot of people had a lot of practice. The only probably good thing about COVID is Otonomee was formed due to COVID, and secondly is that people got used to working from home. But it's not for everybody. Okay, and I think it can cause challenges as if someone is trying to be good and trying to be collaborative in remote working, and it doesn't suit them. It could be because of their lifestyle. It could be because they've got a busy house with 5 kids running in the door every minute. It could be because they don't have the space for a desk. All of those things, so I suppose from an Otonomee perspective, very much how we've tried to overcome that challenge is as a recruitment stage where we're adamant about why somebody wants to work remotely. Okay, what is their why does it suit their life? We ask for a story around how is it going to better their life at recruitment stage. So we try and get those people that we know will work, but no doubt that there's a challenge for some people from a hiring perspective.
Yeah, and I wonder, is that if we look ahead, you mentioned it, Brendan, and it's true, remote work is still very new. We were all working in the office for whatever it was, over 100 years, and didn't quite get that perfect. So even the idea that remote working isn't for everyone, I wonder in 20 years' time, as remote work becomes more normalized and the tech, as you said, has evolved, and how the infrastructure around it, things like co-working hubs or different ways to address some of those challenges you talked about, will that still be the case? There'll always be people, I guess, who are sociable and want to be around, but I think the evolution of the infrastructure and the tech is really, really important.
Absolutely, and companies like Otonomee will get better, and the employee experience will be better, and it'll become norm for some people, right? And again, like I always say it, it isn't for everyone. We said at a recruitment stage, we actually do now in our onboarding, we talk about how do you work well remotely, so we try and educate people on tips and tricks, because it's not about it's not about saying that working remotely there's no challenges. You're better off calling out the challenges to people and saying to them, actually, here's what some people in the organization do to make up for that challenge, right? And to think so again, it's about not hiding it. There's no doubt that there's challenges, but they're just in most cases they're the same challenges as an office. People just forget that they're a challenge in the office, and they blame it on working from home.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think being upfront when you talk to people is really important. That approach that you take, where you have that conversation from the get-go with candidates, so that they know how you work and they're prepared, and they come in with their eyes open, so there's no surprises. That's really, really important.
Absolutely, because they're going to find out after the first day anyway, right? So why would you tell them a lie,
Great, thanks a million. So I'm going to go back to Finn or Rebecca, either of you actually, just around the technology, because we've touched on it a couple of times. So feel free to jump in. Maybe Finn, we'll start with you. Is there particular types of tech that you're using for, say, I don't know, whiteboarding sessions or brainstorming sessions, anything that you'd like to highlight that you find helpful in your team?
Yeah, I think one of the tools we use for collaboration anyway is Miro. It used to be called Beyond the Whiteboard a couple of years ago, but Miro is probably one of the tools that we use on a day-to-day. And for those that don't know, it's a little bit like a whiteboard, and that you can follow people around the screen and drop post-its in and all the rest. So I think that's one of the key tools we use for collaboration, because you can be doing, remote sessions like that via Miro, which would be very close to creating an environment where we're on a whiteboard. Other than that, it's the usual Slack for communication, which might be, other folks might use Teams and all the rest, but that's probably our key tool for communicating internally. We don't really use emails internally. No, we use emails externally for clients and customers. And then I guess we have another tool called Notion, which is kind of like our wiki, which is kind of like the brain of Glofox. So all our processes and documentation is going to be in the one tool. So if you're a new joiner, everything is going to be there, our procedures, how we work. And then the like Slack then would be for use for synchronous updates and as well. I know we're going to be talking about asynchronous communication, which is something that we're probably not as good as Rebecca either, but we're evolving towards more so is being able to use the likes of Loom, which is another tool to kind of do little video snippets. So instead of having like a call, like I'll give an example. Yesterday, I was looking for an update on something, and rather than me have that meeting and call about it, it was just they sent me a 5-minute video, then give me the update, and I could ask, watch that in the evening then and ask a question, and then they can respond asynchronously. So I think that whole shift to async comms, which I know we're going to talk about, is definitely helping us choose certain tools as well. So
great, thanks. And those are really good tools. Miro is really good. We use it ourselves. Notion is a really good tool. It's really interesting as well that you're not using email that much internally. I think a lot of companies now move more towards instant message or Slack and Loom is another one that we also find quite good at Grow Remote for giving updates. Even for our management team updates, we do very short. I would do one on my department, and it takes 5 minutes to record it, takes 5 minutes for someone to listen to it, and it's much more effective than bringing everyone onto a half an hour meeting and using up everyone's time. So those are great. I'm going to have to go to Rebecca and talk about asynchronous communication, because we've touched on it a lot, and we've built you up now as being experts in this space. But it's fair to say you have really pioneered this type of work. So maybe can you explain to people who don't know, first of all, what we mean by asynchronous communication?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, if you think about synchronous communication as being a conversation, so, I might ask Graham a question, how are you today? And Graham might reply to me, and then we get into that back and forth. Asynchronous communication cuts out the back and forth, but it keeps the underlying message. So it's not super unfriendly. A lot of people do think it's just like a really direct and unfriendly way of communicating. It's not that at all. It's just a different mindset. So the way I think of it is, I have a question I want to ask a colleague who happens to be in Australia. Now, what is the most effective way of me to get that message to them so they understand what I'm trying to ask them, and they're able to give me the information that I need to unblock me to continue the rest of my project or the rest of my work or whatever. So if I kind of give a very vague kind of, oh, hi, Andrew, I've got a question for you, and leave it at that, it doesn't really give them much to go on. But if I give them a bit more information, this is my ask, this is the kind of time frame that I would love you to respond in, and this is what I hope to achieve from it. And just being able to structure that message really, really clearly, that is obviously just a very practical example how that is done. And we all kind of lean into that model in Automattic, and it ensures that we're not getting into an unnecessary back and forth. The people that we're asking questions of are not left confused as to what we're asking them, and it also makes sure that we're unblocked, and any information that someone else needs to unblock them is all out in the open.
And just at a practical level, then, it's a really good example you've given. But what kind of platform do you use to communicate? So would that be sent by an email, or do you have Slack, or what do you guys use mostly? Or do you have different channels for different things?
Mostly it's P2, the WordPress theme that I was talking about before. That is generally, we we have a saying in Automattic, and it's just P2 or it didn't happen. So everything we do, everything we agree, everything we kind of move forward and implement is all on a P2. And that makes it easy for us to be able to quickly search. So we can do a search on every P2 in the entire organization and see if a search term has been mentioned or referred to in the past, so we can pull that information up and give us a bit more context. And it's also super useful for people who are onboarding into the company. So if they hear a term that they're not quite familiar with, they can quickly search, they can read the P2, they can read the context, and they're better equipped then to move forward with their own learning. In addition to that, we do use Slack, but more for synchronous communication. And it is easy to get into a conversation on Slack and then for someone to say, shouldn't this be on a P2? This is going to be more interesting for people outside of this immediate group to read. So, you know, we do keep each other in check sometimes. It's really easy to get down that Slack rabbit hole. So being mindful of that and keeping each other in check and putting things on a more public platform, if you like, to get that collaboration as well, to get other people's perspectives and to hopefully come to an outcome that you didn't realize could be as good as it is.
I suppose you have to be a good writer then to be able to communicate. If you're communicating mostly in writing. So do people get training when they join on how to use P2 and best practices for that kind of communication? How much of that is in the onboarding?
Yeah, we have a lot of information to support people. Usually we tend to attract people who are more comfortable with written communication anyway. Our entire hiring process is done pretty much via Slack, or we have interviews via Slack, or we have practical trials where people can get used to that asynchronous communication. And, you know, like Brendan was saying, it's not for everyone. So some people might come in, they might come and do a trial with us. They might get used to that written communication and think, do you know what, this really isn't for me. And they self-select out of that process, and that's absolutely fine. But the people who are really comfortable with that will find themselves excelling in that area. We do have courses to support people if they'd like to improve on that a little bit more. And yeah, we also offer a really good sort of feedback culture as well. So if someone says something and they're kind of getting the same sorts of questions over and over again, you can sort of take a moment to think, is that something I could make a bit clearer in my own communication? And it's a constant learning process, really. So we don't expect people to come in and be able to, you know, like world-class authors or anything. It is always an iterative and learning process, but it is a good start when people already have that enthusiasm anyway.
Yeah, it's a really interesting way of working. In my mind, I'm thinking there's times when I want a response from someone, and if I've asked them a few times and, you know, maybe over an email and I haven't gotten anything, I'll send them an instant message, and then you get your answer. So that's a totally different culture, right, to what you guys are doing at Automattic. If everybody needs to be on board with it though, right, that they're all following the same way of working.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, super. That's really interesting. If anyone wants to know more, you can take a look. There's a lot of content on the Automattic website, and I think Graham has put in some links as well, which is great. Thanks, Graham. I'm just going to look, there's a couple of questions that have come up. So Ivan has asked, so when it comes to remote communication, it's important to mention feedback. So how do you effectively provide feedback when working remotely? That's a really good question. Brendan, I might throw that one your way, if that's okay. How do you guys give feedback and communicate feedback effectively remotely?
Yeah, so like, there's loads of ways you can do it. What there's things that come to mind is we have a town hall every 6 weeks. Okay, so we build the agenda based on feedback that we've gotten, things that people want to ask, things that people want to talk about. Interesting enough, back when we worked in an office, we used to have a town hall. Everyone couldn't be invited because they all wouldn't fit. It wasn't recorded because it didn't make sense to record it. We wouldn't have been able to get up. Now everyone is invited. If you can't go, it's recorded. It's shared on WorkVivo. Everyone can listen to it and can, you know, if they're not in that day, they can listen to it. Okay, so one would be that. We do a lot more now of skip levels and focus groups than we would have done in person. We do things like coffee chats where, you know, we randomly meet people every week. So there's loads of ways to do it. You have to be intentional about it. I think it was Finn that mentioned the word intentional, is because if you're not intentional about it, you don't think about doing them, the week is gone by. Okay, so these are things that are mapped into our day-to-day as they have to be done. You know, we've got and again we're building on this all of the time. But again, we try and get as much face-to-face time as possible. It's always not that easy. Okay, by face-to-face time, I mean obviously online. And then I didn't mention the in-person strategy. We also have an in-person strategy. We have an Irish one in 2 weeks' time, and then we're going to Portugal in 5 weeks' time. And that is, you know, probably the wider feedback, okay, to talk about how things are going. But so there's tactical ones which are day to day. There's longer ones which are like town halls. You know, there's medium ones which are maybe get-togethers, and then there's yearly ones where we get together and we talk to teams. So again, probably the word I would leave it with is you have to be intentional. It's like what works for your team. How do you get them to speak up? You know, some team members will absolutely ping you as soon as they have a challenge, some won't. So it's like trying to capture the people who maybe, you know, are a little bit shyer with their feedback. It's like, how do you create those channels? Obviously, you know, from our, you know, everyone has a manager in our business. I won't get into it, but managers has changed since we've become a remote. It's a lot different now than it was when we were in an office. And their job is to gather that feedback, right, and to make sure that from an employee experience perspective, someone is, you know, is enjoying their work and that they're going to stay with us. So hopefully that's answers some of it.
Great, thanks. And I kind of related, and also a bit of a follow-up, which I might ask you, Finn, is about difficult conversations. So between, say, a manager and a report, or in any setting, I suppose, giving maybe some difficult feedback. Is that harder to do remotely, or what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, it's definitely harder to do remotely in terms of social cues and all the rest, but you know, that's something you wouldn't do obviously asynchronously. So that would be managed directly on a Zoom call. And look, we have done since gone fully remote, is we've encouraged people to have more one-to-ones with their team as well, so at least weekly. And then people meet with the people team on a regular basis as well. So look, we do encourage people to get feedback from their peers as well. We've a performance review process, you know, check in every 3 months and then a formal review every 6 months. So, and it's a big part of, you know, growing the team is being able to give them that feedback and development areas that they can work on and they can grow on. So it's very much in our culture that we, you know, provide that opportunity, that it's just an expectation people are going to get feedback. They want to know where they can improve. So that is done via video, and then through the formal performance review process where they'd have their development areas given in sort of a pack as well. But so those difficult conversations, ideally they'd be face to face over a cup of coffee, but that's not something we can do on a day to day. So it's something we try and replicate. So
great, thanks. And Rebecca, how about you guys? I assume these difficult conversations are something you wouldn't necessarily be doing asynchronously.
Yeah, there is a time and place for asynchronous communication and difficult conversations. The feedback is definitely the moment where it has to be synchronous. You know, it has to be timely and it has to be useful. 100%.
There's another question here, which I actually was going to ask about Zoom fatigue. So, or this over communication. I think we've all experienced Zoom fatigue. Maybe not you, Rebecca, because you sound like you don't use Zoom that much. So does anyone? I'll leave it open to the panel here. Anyone who wants to jump in and answer that question. How do we manage Zoom fatigue?
Yeah, like for us, we have a no Zoom Wednesday. Certainly has helped, right? Because it's just, you know, back-to-back Zooms and it can catch up. And we do encourage people to have their videos on at all times, just in terms of being able to pick up those social cues, as I mentioned. But there may be scenarios where people just may not be feeling up to it. So we do, you know, give people that option. If they want to knock off their camera, that's fine. So for Wednesday, we have this no Zoom policy, which certainly helps. But I think it's back to that point around asynchronous communication, right? So I think the challenge has been that, you know, moving from hybrid to remote is like, oh, we need more communication. So that means we need more meetings. So that means more Zoom. So we've trying to get away from that and trying to reduce the noise in Slack and these instant messages, because people are context switching, all the rest. So that's why moving to this asynchronous communication, we're doing more of these little recorded videos that people can consume in their own time. They don't have to jump between tasks, that they can just focus on their work without going to meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. Now, there may be cases where, you know, you're not going to have a meeting, but we're just trying to reduce that number of meetings so we can obviously run the business up more effectively as well. So I'm mindful that people are just getting burnt out with the number of back-to-back Zooms. So certainly definitely a challenge. It's not perfect, but we've definitely made some strides.
That's great. And I do think that's a movement that's happening now that we're all looking at remote work in the longer term, really being critical about meetings and, you know, do we really need it? Does this need to be a meeting? Does this need to be an hour? Back to what you were saying, Brendan, about the 4-hour meeting, like really interrogating those assumptions that you stick in an hour and just everyone has to give up that hour of their time. So I think that's a really positive step for not just Zoom fatigue, but just people's work-life balance and ability to focus on important work and deep work. Does anyone else want to jump in and talk about Zoom fatigue? Brendan, is this something you're mindful of?
Yeah, absolutely. I think obviously during COVID, you know, as an organization, it was in abundance. It was everywhere, right? Because every organization that you were speaking to, nobody could go and meet. So it was like an avalanche of meetings. Right now, at least, if you're meeting a customer and they're local, you don't have to do it. You can if you want, but you don't have to. Where back, you know, a year ago, 2 years ago, there was no other choice if you wanted to meet them. Similar to Finn, we do a Monday. Well, most of us do a Monday morning where we don't do Zoom calls. Friday morning we don't do Zoom calls. Monday morning is to plan your week, to make sure you're ready. Friday morning is to start to wrap stuff up so that, you know, you're not going into a weekend with like a big long list of stuff to do, because obviously that interferes with your weekend. So we've tried that. We've been really good at it, and we've been really bad at it, right? And that's, you know, that's what happens, you know. But it definitely helps. What we would always, and similarly, you know, if we have an hour meeting, we tell people it should only be 50 minutes because it gives you 10 minutes to relax and to go to the next one. Is there anything worse than hanging up a meeting at 1 minute past 2 and then having to jump on another one and then you're 2 minutes late for the next meeting? There's probably nothing worse. So again, we've been good at it, we've been bad at it, but they're good, you know, they're good ideas. You just need to be strict with yourself, and you need to make sure the rest of the organization is strict with it. So there are two things definitely around Zoom fatigue. And then we tell people, similar to what Finn and Rebecca have said, is it's a sync communication. Does it need to happen? Because if it doesn't need to happen, please do not put it into the calendar, you know. So probably very similar to the guys.
Yeah, and it's really is that repeating it and making sure it's embedded as a culture and that everybody is following it. And you know, sometimes I think in an organization you say it once and you kind of assume that everyone's on board, but it doesn't go into practice until you really repeat it over and over. This is our culture. And if I have a no Zoom Monday, then you don't send me a meeting request on Monday, because I might feel like I have to accept it. Or if we have the gaps, 15-minute gap between meetings, then be mindful of that when you're putting meetings into other people's calendars. So I think that culture is really important, and it's great that you're reinforcing it. Because it does require that change management.
Yeah, and there's that saying that breeds behavior, and you know, if your CEO is putting in our meetings, and if your CEO or, you know, the senior team are putting in meetings for Monday, it'll be gone within a week, if you get what I mean, you know. So it has to also come from top. And as I said, we've been really good at it at times, other times we haven't been good. But again, like, behavior does breed behavior. If you want it to be done, then you have to set the example for it.
Great, thanks. So I do have a question I missed earlier, which is from Anya. We touched on it, but didn't really get into too deeply. So Rebecca, maybe you can answer this, or one of the others if not. So how do you maintain remote communication and collaboration in a multi-generational workforce? I think this is really interesting, because we have our, you know, not always, but often management and senior management would be of an older generation. Not always, but a lot. And then we have a whole new generation of Gen Z coming into the workforce who are 100% digital natives, who are used to communicating in a completely different way. So what do you think, Rebecca? How is that something you're conscious of at Automattic, or not yet? Is it something you're mindful of?
It's a good question. It's a good question. We do have a wide range of age ranges within Automattic, and I think, to be honest, the trial process and the hiring process generally introduces people to the way we speak to each other and the way we communicate, and whether that is going to work for the individual as well. So usually there is a baseline set when people join us that they know we're going to be chatting on Slack, or we're going to be relying on P2. We're not going to be emailing each other and that sort of thing. I've not seen too much friction around that, which I guess is a good thing. We do have a community. We've got like a Slack channel within our kind of more social side of things for people over a certain age, and we go in there and we have a good laugh in there. So we are. It's a very good way to just keep in touch with everyone and to make sure everyone's kind of feeling good about everything going on. But I haven't seen a massive amount of friction, I've got to be honest. I don't know whether Finn and Brendan might be able to shed a bit more light onto that.
Yeah, I think from our side, I mentioned the kind of feedback culture, and obviously there's folks from different age profiles, different genders, and all the rest. So I think for us, it's because we're such a diverse team, getting that feedback from everyone in the team is a very open environment, as I said, in terms of how we can improve. So there might be tweaks that we can make to communication that may not be resonating with certain generations within the team. So I think it's all back to that feedback culture, being able to to get that feedback from everyone in the team, and everyone has that voice. So I think that influences how we communicate then going forward. So make sure that we want to have that inclusion with everyone on our team, regardless. So I think that's a key point, is listening to everyone.
And Brendan, is this something you're conscious of in Otonomee?
Definitely, yeah. We haven't seen it yet, but it's definitely a question. Even when we made the decision, we were thinking about it, we were talking about it. In practice, we haven't seen it. It probably goes back to my point around how managers' roles have changed, because similar to any social media channel, there's going to be some people. So why I say social media channel is we use WorkVivo, as I said, it's a communication tool. We communicate to the whole business. We don't send emails. We communicate through this. Some people are absolutely active on it every day. Some people aren't, right? That doesn't mean people don't look at it and they see it, but they don't post and they don't like and they don't, because that's not their thing, right? So to go back to the manager point, it's up to managers to understand who needs what, and I think that's where it's changed, right? Because their job is to make sure that part of their job is to make sure that their team is happy and they have enough information to do their job, to be happy, to be engaged. Everyone doesn't need to hear everything, if you get what I mean, So we do an event. Most of our events are voluntary. Some people are very happy not to go this one, right? Or, so there's this balance between like ramming communication down people's throats compared to giving them what they want, so and managers play a massive part in that, because they know their team and they should know their team better than everyone else, so again, it's probably that thing of like, it's well documented that you need to communicate more. It's just getting that when you're working remotely, but it's getting that balance between like constantly giving people that they actually don't want compared to what they want, so
Yeah.
we haven't seen it in Otonomee, thankfully, difference in how we need to communicate as of yet, anyway.
Yeah, and I think it's someone, Jelena, I'm sorry if I don't say your name right, has mentioned in the comments that over communication is key, and I think it is really important. And some over communication doesn't mean constant communication either, or it doesn't mean constant Zoom or constant emails. It just means constantly reinforcing, checking in, but checking in a way that makes sense, and checking in a way that works, and giving people, you said, Brendan, and it's true, not everybody wants to be on the social media channel or Slack or whatever it is you're using. Some people are very comfortable not doing that and just giving updates when needed, whereas other people would be very active. So over communication maybe is misinterpreted sometimes, but I think that's what it means. It just means giving everyone the right type of communication that works best, especially in diverse teams. There's one question here on, are there any tools that anyone can recommend that would, if you make a request to somebody, that can show the urgency of the work in a remote team? That's a good question. Anyone have any tips on that? No, this
not
isn't
specific
something
to a tool,
used.
but like if the message needs to be answered, within a particular time frame, I think it's about being clear on that ask, as opposed to a tool to solve that problem. So that if the expectation is, for that example I gave where I asked someone for an update, I was like, end of the week's fine. You need to kind of manage expectations on when you're looking for something, as opposed to, well, I sent that email, I haven't responded. Why is that? So I think if you're clear on like, well, this is the information you need and by when, I think that's the key thing, rather than look for a tool to solve that problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
But open to hear, Rebecca, what do you folks do?
So if it's something like an emergency, like a system has fallen over or whatever, we can quickly alert people in Slack using specific emojis or call words. That's been super useful. So, if you see the red flashing light emoji, it's something urgent that you need to kind of drop everything and attend to straight away. I think that's probably the quickest way. Sometimes you do just need to quickly ping people, and if it's an urgent situation. But as Finn said, sometimes if it's just being clear when the sort of time frame that you need to work in is also incredibly valuable.
Yeah, I think the clarity there is really important. If you say you know, something to be done and give a specific date, then everyone's very clear on when it needs to be done. And it also goes back to your culture as well, of people doing what they say they're going to do, and having that embedded as part of your culture is really important. Just watching the time now, we're running close to the end. I do have one more question here. It's a follow-up, Brendan, to what you were saying about people kind of voluntarily getting into the communication in as much or as little as they want. So how do you balance that with keeping people engaged who don't really join in anything, or don't join in very rarely?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think a lot of companies ask the same question. I think there's a couple of things to it. One is that we will always, right from when someone starts, we'll educate them on why you should get involved and the benefit. And you know, something that I always say is, because we're a startup, we're at 75 people, and we expect to be much higher over the next year, 2 years, 3 years. We say that everyone has a chance to build an autonomy that they're proud of, right? So we start there, in saying that, like, you know, you can be invisible, and you can, you know, do your job and do it really well, and nobody, you know, no one's going to make you do anything. But the other option you have is getting involved and dictating where autonomy wants to go. So that's where we start, okay? We then talk to people about getting involved and why it's important to get involved. And, you know, we do some things that we make people meet people in other teams because we think that's important. But then there's other things like get-togethers, it's voluntary. So the answer to the question is, it's a balance, okay? You want people to see the benefit in it, okay? You want people maybe to come out of a comfort zone and meet people, because maybe that will open up for them, right? And maybe they're afraid initially. But at the same time, it's the balance between some things are voluntary, most things, okay, but some things we just try and give people that nudge. So that it's the balance. People struggle with it. I don't, and I never did, believing in, you know, making people go to stuff, right? Like, we have we hire adults. We expect people to behave like adults, and why would we treat them like a child and saying, well, you have to go to this, you know? So what we find is most people want to go to them. Once you educate them on why we're having this, you know, there's just context behind it. So that's kind of, again, but we're still working it out. But what works for us at this moment in time is kind of that hybrid model.
Okay, perfect. So I think I'm going to do one more question before we finish up. This can be for anyone who wants to jump in, really. I think one important aspect is that when I join as a new joiner, so if I were to join Automattic or Otonomee or Glofox tomorrow, how would I know how you communicate? So have you this documented somewhere in a charter? Is that something that you use? Does anyone want to jump in and talk about that?
Go for it, Rebecca. I'll jump
Rebecca,
in.
I'm looking at you, Rebecca.
Yeah, we start at the trial. So during the hiring process, that is pretty much where we start, and we encourage this this notion of communication is oxygen from the very beginning. So from the minute the applicant will apply to us, they're aware of what we're all about, and we've got that expectation set. So, you know, they can decide for themselves as they get through the hiring process whether it's something that is really comfortable for them, or whether it just is a little bit too far out of their comfort range, and that is absolutely fine. And then we just keep reinforcing that message as we go, and we hope to model good examples by, you know, the amount of documentation we've got, and how we behave as well on a day-to-day basis. I'll pass it over to Finn.
Yeah, it's just to add on that, I think, you know, we're very deliberate about our onboarding process, right? So obviously the sooner we ramp people up, the sooner they're going to add value, and it's obviously more beneficial for them as well. So we have a big, you know, structure around our onboarding in terms of being able to. There's a huge amount put in terms of the documentation, what the things they need to know, who the people they need to speak to, and obviously their own roles and responsibilities. So we do certainly invest a lot in that in terms of better understanding our culture. And then the key piece then is about the ways of working. So you mentioned there in terms of a charter or a brief, we have those defined in terms of, okay, this is how our meeting should be run. This should be 30 minutes. You need the agenda. Like, you know, to that point, we don't want people that are coming maybe from not working remotely to be just jump in straight into our culture is really difficult. So I think there's a lot of emphasis put on our onboarding and having that charter of, like, these are our defined ways of working. This is how meetings should be run. This is how collaboration works here in Glofox. This is how you need to communicate. And then, you know, in those first initial weeks and months, that's the key piece for us, and that's why we really over invest in that, because it's obviously going to be hugely beneficial for them as well to rather than being lost. Oh, this is a new job. I'm remote. I don't know what, I don't know what I'm doing. How am I, what's the right way for me to message? Do I go direct? Do I use Slack? All that kind of stuff is thrashed out initially on that onboarding.
That's brilliant. And I mean, that helps get the employee up to speed quickly. It also helps with the risk that somebody might leave after a few weeks because they're just too confused by all the different channels and they're not quite sure what's the right way to work. So I think that having that really clear onboarding where a new hire can go in and see, okay, this is how we communicate. We use email for this and we use Slack for that and we use P2 for everything if you're at Automattic. So I think that is so important. Anyone on the call who is interested in learning more about that, we actually did a playbook with Glofox, actually participated in it. And one of the sections in it is around communication and onboarding and how to do a really good onboarding process. So we can send a link out to you guys, or maybe Graham can add it in the chat if he has time to do that before we finish up. But that onboarding piece is really, really important. Okay, I'm gonna finish up next. We have 2 minutes before the hour. So thank you. First of all, I want to say a big thank you to our panel. Really appreciate you taking the time. It's been really interesting talking to you. So thank you very much. And I'll also say thanks to Graham for doing Trojan work in the chat there, capturing all the insights and answering all the questions. And last but not least, thank you to all of our participants for joining and for being so interactive and asking so many questions. And we hope to see you all again soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye-bye.